It's Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook page over to a new and fantastic writer to talk about their work and their projects. This morning, we're happy and proud to welcome Kimberlee Keeline, otherwise known as Kim. Kim is a former academic. She's written nonfiction, but she loves writing mysteries. And she's currently writing several of them. I guess three or four of your short stories, is that right, Kim? Three, okay, have been published, and she's currently revising her two mystery novels from two different series. Wow. You can find those short stories in the anthologies Crossing Borders, California Fold'em, and Nameless, which are prominently displayed behind her. Welcome, Kim. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, we're excited to have you. We love short stories. I'm always fascinated, and I know we were talking about this a little bit before. We're fascinated by people who can actually write a short story. People are like, "Wow, you wrote a novel! Look at all those words." But all those words are very forgiving. But when you write a short story and you have things like length limitations that you have to worry about and try and get everything crammed into X number of words. Talk a little bit about how you approach doing that in your short story writing.
Yeah, so I agree that it is hard. I mean, my first short story, which is in Crossing Borders, The Crossing is about 3,500 words. It's the shortest of the three I wrote. And it was hard. I'd never written a short story before that one. The San Diego Sisters in Crime chapter announced they were going to do an anthology. I thought, what the heck? I mean, it might be fun to try, and all they can say is no. So I read a couple short stories because I wasn't a big short story reader of modern ones. I mean, I'd read, Sherlock Holmes short stories and stuff, but that's different than what goes out nowadays. Right. So I read a few and went, oh, well, I guess I could try. I mean, and I was pleased. I mean, I managed to get the anthologies usually have a 5,000 word limit, which sounds like a lot, but it's actually tiny, particularly if you're trying to do a mystery. Because there's clues and there's characters to introduce and there's things going on. Now, my first one I kept short partly by having it literally be a woman in her car. And so you never leave the car, and it's her and then the man who shows up with a gun. So it's her fighting for her life in her car. So it's the worst day of her life, and she's trying to cross the border from Mexico into San Isidro. I lived near the border and taught near San Isidro for quite a while, so I was familiar with the area, and I was interested in what would that be like if you were at that border crossing, which is very busy, and then suddenly you found yourself in a very enclosed space with a gun. And so it helped me keep it short because it was such a enclosed space, 1 hour in one space with two people. That was easier. Then it got a little harder when I decided, well, I got one short story published, and I'm pleased to say it was a finalist for the Derringer Best Short Story Award, which is a national award. So I was very excited about that. And I thought, well, I'll write some more. I'll try.
Well, tell us about that story. Tell us about
the crossing.
Right.
So like I said, it's a woman on the very worst day of her life trying to cross the border when a man shows up with a gun. And it was just, I was just really pleased it went well. So then I tried to write two others.
But before you move on, I'm curious.
Yeah,
okay, so you have the plot. So how do you get the emotional impact of a story in five? I think people can write stories, but how do you get that emotional through line, that plot part that when you finish reading the story, people go, I just finished. That was wow.
Yeah, it was hard. I think part of it in that one I solved by making the point of view hers, so that you were very close to her. Because I think we can all sort of understand the frustration, the terror, the horror that she's going through. At the same time, I didn't want to give too much away about what had gone on before before the man got in the car, which is hard if you're telling it from the point of view of the person who's, there. So I had a lot of balancing of trying to give you enough info about what had happened to her previously that was making it already a bad day for her without giving away too much. Because there's a twist at the end I don't want to give away, but
yes, there is. I remember that story.
yeah.
And then, so on your next story, was that written to a theme, or did they give you a prompt, or?
Yes, all of them were written to themes. So the first one was crossing borders, and I took it very literally. I literally had a woman crossing the border because I lived and worked in a border town for years, and I thought, if I'm familiar with the Mexican border, I should write about it. The second one was called California Scheming, and I had just taken a class by the author Carolyn Wheat, where she had given us a writing prompt of someone banging their fist and saying that they would not give them money. And I had written about this con artist character at a pawn shop, and then I'd written sort of a novella. And while I had been writing that, I'd been thinking about what had happened to make him need the money so desperately. So when I heard California Scheming, I'm like, I've got a con artist who I had sort of thought of a backstory for. Why don't I do that backstory as a short story? And it's about a con artist who is in a poker game, and he thinks he's pulling a con when things go very differently than he expected. And it's the thing that's going to make him so desperate in the story that I had already written. So it was fun. I've never written from somebody's point of view who was so different from me. There's nothing about Eddie. I don't even play poker. I had to research poker. I had to then send it to friends who do play poker and say, please tell me if I've gotten something about this game wrong, because it's Texas Hold'em. And I was like, I know
Something
nothing.
that Google hadn't told me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had a friend who does it professionally, and he looked at it and he's like, no, it's fine. So I was like, okay, thank goodness. And people would say, boy, you play poker. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
never had played poker.
You're working on your bluffing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that
So,
was interesting. As a con artist at a poker game, so different from me, not even a woman, which I've always written, female main characters. So it was fun. And I was pleased when it got accepted to the BoucherCon anthology. Of course, it was during the whole pandemic thing got canceled, and we didn't have a conference, and which was a real shame, because some of the people who were in the book with me were people I really wanted to meet, and I would have if things had gone differently. But the world's what it is. So yeah, I was excited by that one. And then I had heard about the Sacramento Sisters in Crime chapter, which I joined during the pandemic because they were doing such wonderful videos. And so they were putting on these great, meetings that people could go to. And so I'd gone to some, and they had an anthology that said it was about cemeteries in Northern California. And I went, well, that's really interesting. So I just sort of looked up what cemeteries are in Northern California. When I realized that there was one that I sort of knew about, I hadn't realized, but Colma, California is the cemetery place for San Francisco. They dug up all the bodies in San Francisco and moved them to Colma so that they could have more property to build on. And then all the dead today.
Something that sounds so very wrong about that.
So the short story begins that in Colma, California, the city of souls, where the dead outnumber the living 1,000 to 1, you'd think one more body wouldn't matter. And so it's literally about a teenager, because I thought, well, who lives in a cemetery town? Well, mostly people who work in the cemetery business, but they've got to have families. And in fact, there is one high school in Colma, California. So I thought, well, what if you were a teenager living in a cemetery town? How weird must that be? So I looked it up, and there was a cemetery that has the Emperor Joshua Norton. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but during the sort of gold rush San Francisco, there was a somewhat crazy, somewhat homeless guy who basically announced that he was the Emperor of the United States. And he was taken somewhat seriously by people. He would write newspaper articles, and he'd wear a uniform, and people would give him things. And he became sort of a tourist attraction for San Francisco. Interesting guy. Well, his body had been moved to Colma. And so I looked up the cemetery he was in, and there's a condominium that literally overlooks that cemetery. And I thought, well, what if the teenager's family lives in that condominium? And what if she walks in the cemetery frequently, and then she finds a body laying on top of Joshua Norton's grave? And so that's where that story came from. And it was probably the hardest one I've written, because when my first draft came out, it was double the length it was supposed to be. It was almost 10,000 words, because it's an actual mystery. The others were more crime stories. Something's happening and the person has to deal with it. This person literally, there's a body, there's clues, there's investigation, because this person doesn't have a name and she just wants to know who this person is. She's concerned that the family won't know that this person has died. And so she tries to find out, but that means she has to follow leads. And that's a lot harder to do in 5,000 words. That's what I discovered. But I also liked it because I was a huge fan. The reason I love mysteries is I started off with Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden and the three investigators and all these teenage detectives who, do solve cases, frequently not murders, of course. But in this case, she wasn't trying to solve a murder. She was just trying to find out, who is this woman? That's why the story is called Nameless, because this is a nameless woman. And being able to write the sort of things that inspired me as a kid, the idea of a teenager following leads and trying to find something that she feels passionate about, was kind of exciting to me, because it sort of harkened back to what made me love mysteries. Because I read those, and then I went to Agatha Christie and Dorothy L. Sayers and Sherlock Holmes and all that stuff,
Well, I think it's so interesting that that mysteries not only lend themselves to long form, but they also lend themselves so well to short form. Anthologies, and there's so many things we could talk to you about. And because we have limited time, so I'm going to leave this up to you. Do you want to talk about why people like anthologies, or do you want to talk about some of the other things that you do in your life, because you're so involved in the mystery community?
We can do a little of both. I mean, the main thing I'd say about the short stories is people do like the variety. They like the ability to have a short, span of time that they can devote something to. I know as a writer, it's exciting because I can experiment with points of view and with character and with plot in ways that you can't always devote a whole book to. I'm not sure, if Eddie the con man, I've written a novella so far with him, but I'm not sure if he's a full book character. He's hard to write, but I can certainly do a short story with him because, it lets me experiment with his voice. So I think there's a lot of reasons why short stories appeal to people, in addition to the fact that some people just don't have the time. So it takes just as much time to write, but for reading, it's obviously much faster. So I think that's why some people really like to read them.
Yeah, interesting. And then, we were talking earlier too about that you are involved in the mystery community more so than just writing, not to downplay how difficult that is, but you have some exciting things coming up, some exciting events, right?
Yes, thank you. So I am hosting BoucherCon 2023 in San Diego.
So for people who don't know what BoucherCon is,
it's a big mystery convention. It's a fan-run mystery convention for fans. So we have guests of honor that are big names. They come, other authors come, and they do panels and talks and activities. And there's just, tons of fun, basically. It's for people who love mysteries, like I love mysteries. And so I'm really excited that I'll be able to share this love of mysteries with, up to 2,000 people.
Your closest friends?
Yes, that's our maximum attendance. We cut it at that so it doesn't get completely out of hand. Because we want it to still feel intimate and a chance for you to actually meet these people. And if it gets bigger than that, then it just starts feeling kind of, Comic-Con,
right,
where it's like this huge thing that you just bump up against people constantly.
right.
So I think BoucherCon is going to be a lot of fun. If you haven't done a convention, there's a number of really wonderful ones. I was involved in Left Coast Crime 2020. Unfortunately, as we know, 2020 was not a great year for conventions, and we got shut down halfway through our first day because we happened to be running the week that the pandemic hit the United States. So it was one of those things where we didn't know it was coming, and then suddenly it was here, and that was fun. but I'm trying to do VoucherCon 2023, where hopefully we will be past all of this and won't have to deal with it.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. I mean, it's such a huge undertaking, and I'm sure that that sounds really exciting. And you're also writing novels, and you have a lot going on. But just so before we sign off, where can people find the anthologies? So we have Cemetery Plots, we have
Yeah.
Crossing Borders, and what is the name? I know Nameless is the name of the short story, but what is the name of the anthology?
Cemetery Plots is where Nameless is. And then California
Theming, right.
Hold'em is in California Theming.
Oh,
So,
cool. All right.
but they're all available, of course, in the normal places one would get books, bookshops.org and Amazon. And if you can't find it, I have links on my website, kimkeeline.com.
Okay, wonderful. Congratulations on that. Please come back when the novels get published. We'd love to talk about them.
Thank you.
I know writing 4 at a time is no small endeavor. But,
it shows I can't always focus, but I'm very excited. So I just move back and forth between them, and they're getting really close.
Okay, well, we'll think good thoughts. Thank you again for being here, Kim. For everybody who's listening, thank you for being here. Kim is going to be available on Facebook. So if you have questions and comments, she will be checking in. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and comment. We appreciate all those things. And we will see you next time on the SCWA Hump Day Book Tour. Bye, everyone.